Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a check of the top headlines this hour. The US and India release an interim trade framework aimed at lowering tariffs and deepening economic ties. Both sides say more negotiations are needed to finalize a broader trade agreement. Iran's foreign minister says US nuclear talks mediated by Oman are off to a good start and will continue. Tehran insists it will discuss only its nuclear program and calls for talks without threats or pressure. Thousands gather in Islamabad to bury the 31 killed in a suicide bombing at a Shiite mosque. Islamic State claims the attack as residents fear further violence. U.S. Navy Secretary John Fillon listed as a passenger on Jeffrey Epstein's private plane in 2006. Fillon declined to comment through a Navy spokesperson. U.S. President Donald Trump refuses to apologize for racist video on Obama's after removing racist video. "I didn't make a mistake," is what he said. A man is charged with threatening to kill U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance during a visit to Ohio. Prosecutors say the charges stem from incidents in January. Trump signs an order warning of new U.S. tariffs on countries that continue to trade with Iran, citing a possible 25% rate. The move comes as U.S.-Iran talks continue in Oman, with Trump restating opposition to Iran nuclear weapons. The U.S. appeals court upholds Trump's policy of mandatory detention for migrants without bond. The 2-1 ruling marks the first appellate backing despite widespread lower court opposition. Investigators examine a newly surfaced message in the search for the missing mother of U.S. journalist Savannah Guthrie. Authorities say the message is being checked for authenticity as the search enters the 6th day. All right, viewers, on to now news from the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, Ukraine has reported a massive overnight Russian attack on its energy infrastructure, with President Volodymyr Zelensky saying more than 400 drones and around 40 missiles were used. The strikes targeted power generation facilities, the national grid, and distribution substations, hitting regions including Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, Rivne, and Volyn. Emergency power cuts were introduced across the country, leaving millions without electricity in sub-zero temperatures, while Ukrainian officials requested emergency power imports from Poland. Energy workers are ready to begin repairs as soon as security conditions allow, according to Energy Minister Denise Brown. Zelensky condemned Moscow's attacks, calling on the international community to respond and ensure Russia cannot use the cold as leverage against Ukraine. Julia Kazdobina, senior fellow at the Ukrainian Prism, joins us in this discussion from Poland. Julia, thanks very much for joining us. Firstly, Ukraine and Russia continue to be in this war state for 4 years. How long do you think Russia can really go on striking Ukraine when its economy is not doing as well as Putin would expect it to? It's only seen 1% growth compared to the previous year.
Well, I would like to make a little correction because this war has been going on for longer than 4 years. It started in 2014 with Russia occupying Ukrainian Crimean Peninsula and launching its aggression in the east of Ukraine in the spring of 2014. But answering your question, how long Russia can go on, it's a difficult question to ask because so far Western sanctions have not been successful enough to limit the deliveries of weapon components to Russia. So Russia is capable of producing weapons, and because we see that a lot of the missiles that are fired at Ukraine, they have been produced recently, and so Russia's military production is still going on. Also, Russia is supported by China, although China is very careful not to supply specifically military goods to Russia, but it supplies dual-use goods, and it supports a Russian war effort because it actually benefits, it serves Chinese interests. And so we are not sure how long this can go, because Putin is pretty much in control of the information space in Russia. And this year they're spending a lot more money on their domestic propaganda to make sure that they are in control of the population thinking, and then they continue to present Ukraine as a threat and as this non-existent nation or anti-Russian Western project. And unless they are stopped, unless there is some sort of an understanding with China that China should stop supporting Russia, and that unless there is efficient enforcement of sanctions that does not allow Russia to continue building weapons, they will continue. They are not interested in stopping.
All right, Julia, stay on with me. There's some more details that we are picking up. Viewers, now Ukraine's President Zelensky is also saying that talks in Abu Dhabi focused on how a possible ceasefire could not be monitored on the ground. Those are breaking news details that we are bringing you, details emerging freshly. He says discussions including technical mechanisms and potential involvement by the United States. Zelensky also says Washington wants Ukraine and Russia to end the war before the summer. The comments come as diplomatic efforts intensify to find a pathway toward halting the fighting. All right, I request Julia to join us back in the discussions here. Julia, would you say that these Abu Dhabi talks have made any real progress, because the strikings and shellings are continuing? Ukrainians are waging the cold weather with loss of infrastructure and power and energy grids. What really needs to be done to bring a ceasefire as soon as possible?
Well, again, ceasefire is the issue of putting enough pressure on the Russian Federation to make it stop, because it's the war of aggression that was launched by a much larger state against a much smaller state, and it's a continuous war of aggression, and Ukraine has tried several times to talk to Russia, and Russia always insists on continuing the war until its demands, its maximalist demands, are met. And it's great that in these talks in Abu Dhabi, Ukraine is showing a constructive stance, that is really interested in ending the war, and Ukraine is discussing all these details about how, if there is a ceasefire, how this is going to be monitored. But Russia continues its tactics of trying to bomb Ukraine into submission. And in the beginning, you gave this news that this night again, Ukrainian infrastructure was under attack. And so what they're trying to do, Kyiv is a city, is a huge city of more than 3 million people. And they have already destroyed several heat-producing plants, but it has been able to survive more or less on electricity. But it does not produce its own electricity, and it gets electricity from the west of Ukraine, from the Khmelnytsky nuclear power plant. And so what the Russians tried to do today, they tried to cut off the line that leads from the Khmelnytsky atomic power plant to Kyiv, to make sure that no electricity flows into the city. So their goal is not to achieve peace. Their goal is to bomb Ukraine into accepting their absolutely maximalist and absolutely illegitimate demands. And so the only way to do it is to use force to stop them. And so far, Ukraine is definitely weaker than Russia, although we're trying as much as we can, trying to attack their military facilities and the facilities they use for attacking Ukraine on the Russian territory. But so far, we have not been receiving enough support, and so far, not enough measures have been implemented to actually undermine Russia's ability to continue this.
Right, Julia, talking of the support that you are seeking for Ukraine, do you think the United States is really doing enough, especially as far as the question of Donbass is concerned, which remains the last major sticking point?
I would not say that Donbass remains a sticking point. I think Donbass is more of a point that diverts everybody's attention from what is happening outside of Donbass. So while everybody is discussing how you can resolve the situation in Donbass, Russia is actually continuing to build up its military economy. It's continuing to reorganize its leadership and reorganize its northern military district on the border with the Baltic states, and it continues its hybrid attacks and on European countries. And recently there was a huge cyber attack, for example, on Polish energy grid. So while everybody is under the illusion that Russia is involved in negotiating peace, Russia is actually preparing and testing its capabilities elsewhere. And so I don't think it's correct to refer to Donbass as a sticking point. It's more of a something that diverts everybody's attention. And the U.S. is not doing enough, in my view, but the U.S. has a different goal in this case. So the U.S. is interested in achieving strategic stability with Russia, and so it's trying to seek some sort of a compromise, but that's not what Russia is doing. Russia is forced to sit down at the negotiating table, but you can bring somebody to the negotiation table, but you cannot make them agree on something, and you cannot while you're negotiating, you cannot control their other actions. And so this is what's happening. And I think one of the obstacles is that President Trump really believes that Putin wants peace, but that's not the case. Russian actions indicate the opposite.
All right. Well, Julia, thanks very much then for joining us and for speaking to us with your perspective here. And with that, viewers, we're now going to proceed to news on the US-India trade deal. Now, India says it has secured a major edge in global trade after finalizing an interim agreement with the United States. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal says that the deal protects India's red lines on agriculture and dairy while opening the vast US market to Indian exporters. Goyal said farmers and MSMEs stand to gain, with many Indian agricultural products set to enter the US at zero duty. These include tea, coffee, spices, coconut oil, fruits, vegetables, cereals, and processed foods. He added that products where India is self-reliant were kept out of the agreement. The deal, nearly a year in the making, is expected to unlock access to a $30 trillion US market, with a final agreement likely by mid-March. Let's listen in.
कैसे कई सारे किसानों के किए गए वस्तु, किसानी क्षेत्र के उत्पाद अब भारत से शून्य ड्यूटी पर अमेरिका में जा सकेंगे और जिसका भारत के निर्यात को फायदा होगा। इसी के साथ साथ एक देश में कुछ लोग जो भारत के किसानों के विरोधी हैं, भारत के किसानों की चिंता नहीं करते हैं, भारत को गुमराह करने की कोशिश करते हैं, ऐसे कुछ लोगों को आज ये देख के हैरानी हो रही है कि कैसे भारत और यूएस के इस एग्रीमेंट के द्वारा कई सारे किसानी क्षेत्र के सामान पर शून्य कोई लाभ भारत में इंपोर्ट करते हुए दिया गया है। कोई लाभ नहीं दिया गया, कोई रियायत नहीं दी गई है। लोग सोचते थे ना कि भाई किसानी क्षेत्र में सब खुल जाएगा। हमने कोई ऐसा काम नहीं किया है जिसमें किसी भी किसान को नुकसान हो सके।
All right, joining me now in this discussion is Ross Feingold, who's a political analyst and joins us from Taipei in Taiwan. Ross, thanks very much for joining us. Firstly, let's talk about what has made the United States sign this deal with India. What's really for the US to gain in it, especially given the fact that India has secured a better deal compared to other South Asian nations, let's say Pakistan.
I wouldn't quite phrase it that way. I think both sides achieved a lot of what they want. From the United States perspective, India has agreed to purchase $500 billion of various kinds of products from the United States. India has agreed to lower tariffs on a number of products made in the U.S. and exported to India. And India has also agreed to reduce non-tariff trade barriers, make modifications to technical standards for certain products that made it difficult for American products to compete. So from the United States perspective, like many of the other trade deals that President Trump has negotiated, it looks pretty good as long as those purchases or investments are actually made. So in the case of some other countries, they've made very large investment commitments in the United States, and hopefully that money will show up. In the case of India and some other countries, there's a very, very significant commitment to make purchases from the United States. So that's a very good deal for the U.S. If the money all shows up. At the same time, India has also achieved some of the goals that it wanted to achieve, including excluding certain products from the agreement. And being able to protect certain domestic industries. So at least at first glance, this looks like a win-win.
What has India given on agriculture in the US trade deal?
Well, there are certain products that India grows domestically, and there are other products that it doesn't. So for products that it doesn't have a strong local industry, and it's willing to open the market and make purchases from the United States. For certain other products, it was able to exclude it from this agreement because it does have to take in mind the needs of the domestic industry. So again, I would say that was a win-win because both sides got something. I would say even more than a little. I would say both sides got a lot of what they wanted.
All right, let's talk about the timing of the deal also. I already raised the points of what Pakistan says that India managed to secure a better deal than Pakistan. But let's talk about the timing from a US point of view. Midterms are of course approaching, and then India has also secured this massive FTA with Europe. How important was it really then for US to have this deal with India? Will it really help its economy ahead of the midterms, at least send a positive sentiment to the US voters?
Trade with India is important to the United States. It's certainly been growing, but I'll be frank, I don't think this is specifically something that's going to be relevant in the midterm elections. I think the trade agreements collectively, including India, that Trump has negotiated, will become a talking point, but not necessarily in the India agreement specifically. And also, I think looking back, now that Trump has been in office a little over a year, ideally, this would have been completed a long time ago. So I wouldn't read too much into the timing of this being announced in the past few hours, other than it's a coincidence with other events, and it was extremely complex and just took a lot of time. And part of the time, the United States team was negotiating with other trade partners throughout most of last year. Part of the time, as everybody knows, the two sides were not happy with each other over a variety of issues. So it moved at a certain pace. It's good that it's done. Looking back, it would have been better had this been completed earlier. I think both sides would have preferred if it was completed earlier. But the specific timing itself, I wouldn't overanalyze that.
All right, Ross. Thanks then for your comments here. Requested to stay on for another discussion. And moving ahead, viewers, President Donald Trump has condemned but refused to apologize for a post showing former President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama as apes. The White House initially defended the post, however, it was removed 12 hours later. Meanwhile, the clip on Truth Social also amplified false claims of 2020 election fraud and included a brief AI-generated sequence of dancing primates. Trump said he had not seen the full post before it was shared and described the offensive images as a small part of a broader message on voter fraud. Furthermore, the incident drew bipartisan criticism, including from Black Republican leaders, while the White House confirmed the post was shared in error. Regardless of the outrage, no apology has yet been issued. Let's listen in.
No, I didn't make a mistake. I mean, I look at a lot of thousands of things. I looked at the beginning of it, it was fine. But they had that one post, and I guess it was a takeoff. By the way, a lot of people covered, if you look at where it came from, I guess it was a takeoff from The Lion King. And certainly it was a very strong post in terms of voter fraud. Nobody knew that was at the end. If they would have looked, they would have seen it. And probably they would have had the sense to take it down. But that was a takeoff of The Lion King. And a lot of people were covered, in different positions. So, but I spoke to Tim Scott. He was great. Tim is a great guy. He understood that 100%.
Request Ross to join us back in this discussion. Ross, what are your first comments?
It's completely inappropriate, and that's why the White House removed it. They should never have posted it, and they should have removed it sooner. This is a very old, what we call in America, a trope to portray Black people like this, it really is regrettable. I would say even inexcusable. Are they going to fire the person who did it or reveal who it was? I'm sure there are going to be public demands for that. The White House will probably be reluctant to do so. And then we'll see how long this becomes or remains a conversation point. I mean, there's so many other issues going on in the United States right now. And of course, the immigration and protests against immigration enforcement has gotten so much media attention in recent days. So how long will this stay in the news cycle is something to watch.
How do you see the fact that Trump has, of course, refused to apologize? The video has been taken down, but no apology, and he's adamant on the fact that he's not going to apologize, and he's not made a mistake.
President Trump rarely apologizes. It's not the first time he said or posted something that many people found inappropriate or offensive, but it's not his style to apologize. And one, we just look at his history. It's not his style to do that. But two, what would be the upside? He's in the 2020 election, he won about 8% of the Black vote. It went up tremendously in 2024 to 15%, but polls are showing some of that support. He's starting to lose some of that support heading into the midterm. Apologizing over this probably won't be the most significant factor on that issue as well. And also, a lot of this depends on where the swing districts in the House of Representatives are and what the makeup of the voter demographic is in those districts. But I could imagine somebody on the team said, maybe you should apologize. And he probably said, you're out of your mind. I'm not going to apologize. There's no upside to doing so.
Let's also talk about the Obama-Trump rivalry. It's not a new one. President Barack Obama had also taken several times on Trump, and this is just another instance of that bitterness that was seen between the two leaders publicly.
Well, the tradition in the United States, of course, has been that former presidents try to remain removed from day-to-day politics. Yes, sometimes they've been involved in public policy issues or global issues. For example, Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton. These are people who started to travel the world and work on things like public health, for example. But that clearly this has changed in recent years. Obviously, when President Trump was out of office between 2021 and 2025, he was active politically every day, criticizing President Biden. Barack Obama tries to adhere to the tradition. He tries not to be involved day to day in American politics. But the demand is clearly there from the Democratic base. They want him to be involved because he's a person that still commands the respect of many Democratic voters. He's still very popular with the Democratic base. And there really isn't anyone else on the Democratic side at the moment who could fulfill that role. Is he really going to do it? Is he really going to get involved day to day in politics? Probably not. Maybe he'll do some campaigning around the midterms and then a couple of years later in the next presidential election. But will he have a day-to-day active role in politics or be the person who's on social media every day refuting things that Trump says? Probably not.
All right, sure. Ross, thanks very much for joining us in this discussion. And we now move on, viewers. Now, United Nations Humanitarian Agency has said that a drone attack on an aid convoy in Sudan's North Kordofan state killed one person and wounded several others. The convoy was headed to an area near El Obeid, a city under army control but encircled by the paramilitary rapid support forces for a year. The army and the RSF have been at war since April 2023, with the conflict killing tens of thousands of people, displacing millions more, and triggering one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. The United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator in Sudan, Denise Brown, has said that she came across the aftermath of the strike, including burning aid trucks, after visiting El Obeid. And on to now some science and tech news. SpaceX is set to resume its regular Falcon 9 flights after the short-lived suspension due to an in-flight anomaly from the last Starlink mission. Despite the failure of the rocket's second stage to ignite correctly ahead of the scheduled deorbit burn maneuver, all 25 Starlink satellites have entered orbit. The FAA has closed its investigation and has accepted SpaceX's report, declaring the Falcon 9 rocket ready for action again. SpaceX is about to launch the Starlink 1733 mission from California, which will include a rocket booster landing in the Pacific, bringing the pace of SpaceX's flights in short intervals. And that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for all international news and updates.